May the 16th, 1943. The medieval city of Lincoln is about to be woken from its reverie. This night is the culmination of one man's grand experiment. If it works, it will cripple the German war machine in one daring raid. Over 4 years, this man had been developing ideas so wild that at first the military planners had laughed in his face before acknowledging the brilliance of his vision. This film is the story of his secret experiments and reveals how an outstanding mind worked out how to break the indestructible. Autumn 1940, the Blitz. German bombs were raining on British cities. In a library behind the sandbags, 53-year-old Barnes Wallis, one of Britain's most talented aircraft designers, was working on his own idea of how to shorten the war. For more than a year, he had spent his spare time poring over maps and plans of the rivers and reservoirs that nourish industrial Germany. 6 massive dams, holding back millions of gallons of water, feeding the factories of the Ruhr Valley with hydroelectric power and providing them with their most valuable raw material. It took 200 tons of water to make 1 ton of steel. If the British could turn off the tap, the Nazi war machine would grind to a halt. Long before the war, the RAF had looked at the dams, but rejected them as potential targets. Conventional bombs, even when dropped in large quantities, didn't have the explosive power to break such massive structures. Busting the dams seemed impossible. This was the challenge to which Barnes Wallis had responded.
He was a Victorian and a great empire man, basically, and the country meant an awful lot to him. So anything he could do, which he thought would help the country, that was what he was put on this earth to do, basically.
In spring 1941, he was ready to unveil a bomb as ingenious as it was powerful, the 10-ton earthquake bomb. An aerodynamic masterpiece, it would break the sound barrier on its descent, while its offset tail fins would make it spin like a giant dart. In his mind, it would dive to the bottom of the reservoir and drill into the soil, where it would explode and cause a small earthquake, hence its name. A meeting was arranged in Whitehall for Wallis to present his bomb to the Ministry of Aircraft Production.
They more or less laughed at him and said, well, you know, this is ridiculous because we haven't got an aircraft capable of carrying it.
Wallis played his trump card.
Wallis said, well, I've got a drawing here which shows a 6-engined aircraft we've designed back in Weybridge, which if you let us build this aircraft, it will carry your bomb.
The Victory would be bigger and faster than any other bomber in the world. It would fly in the stratosphere beyond the reach of enemy fire. It would wield the destructive power of a whole squadron of conventional bombers. But Wallis was rebuffed. Britain just didn't have the resources to build his visionary aeroplane.
With all the requirements for labour, this was just not on, and so I think he was more or less told to go back to Weybridge and get on and design his airplanes and stop messing them about.
Wallis was not about to give up. A new bomber was coming into service. The Lancaster could carry a mighty 14,000-pound bomb, still only half as big as Wallis's earthquake bomb. Could this destroy a German dam? Wallis had to experiment. He enlisted the help of the Road Research Laboratory. They built a scale model of their main target in the Ruhr Valley, the Möhne Dam. To replicate the Möhne's masonry structure, they cast 3 million cement blocks. After months of painstaking bricklaying, they were ready. They tested their scaled-down bombs not over the dam in the air, but in the water, for a very good reason. Sidney Alford, who designs explosive devices for the military, explains why bombs work better in water than in air.
I'm going to demonstrate how an explosive charge applied to a target behaves when you fire it in air. I'm ready to fire. Here we are. This is pretty well exactly what I expected. You can see the narrow groove here, that is in fact a slight groove, where the detonation cord was in close contact with the metal. The hot gases simply sprang away into the air. Here I have detonation cord exactly as before, the same type of cord, same position, taped down in contact with the metal over the same distance. But this time in front of it I've got some lay-flat tubing which contains water. Firing! There we are. I think you will agree that it's almost counterintuitive that a little drop of water can have such a dramatic result. The water delayed the dissipation into the surrounding atmosphere of the very high pressure gases generated by the detonation of the explosive. So the same pressure was applied to the metal significantly longer. That's the result.
Armed with this knowledge, Sidney takes on a 5-ton dam.
Firing line, please.
Sidney Alford recreates an experiment on a model of a German dam. Will he manage to shatter 5 tons of concrete with only 2 ounces of plastic explosive? He suspends his charge in the water.
4, 3, 2, 1. Good dam.
Sidney moves his charge closer to the dam to find out how close he'll need to get to break it.
2, 1. We've knocked the parapets off. That doesn't matter structurally, but we've made one vertical crack from top to bottom. I'm not a structural engineer, but my guess is that is not beyond hope. It might be possible to patch it up, but it is seriously weakened. But it is not catastrophic failure.
As long as there's water between the bomb and the dam, Sidney has no luck. Just like his wartime predecessors, Sidney finds that the secret to dam busting is putting the charge in direct contact with the dam face. This allows the mass of the water behind the charge to focus the shockwave onto the dam wall.
2, 1. That is semi-catastrophic.
The 1942 experiment went a little better. Now Wallis was ready to tackle a real dam. He found what he wanted hidden away in a Welsh forest. The Nantigro Dam was 5 times smaller than the Myrna, but it was as close to the real thing as Wallis was going to get. This is unique footage of Barnes Wallis observing the experiment. The team attached a charge directly to the face of the wall and held their breath. Success. But there was still a huge problem. How to deliver his bomb precisely to the dam wall from an aeroplane. Conventional bombing was simply not accurate enough. Wallis had read about a naval technique forgotten since Admiral Nelson's time, called skip shot. Gunners who wanted to pierce the hull of a ship would skip their cannonballs over the surface of the water. Could skipping his bomb be the answer to Wallis's problem? Armed with a bag of his daughter's marbles and a homemade catapult, he started experimenting in the privacy of his own back garden. 16-year-old Barnes Wallis Jr. was recruited as his research assistant.
Look, the distance...
60 years on, Barnes Jr., an aircraft designer like his father, wants to see for himself what it takes to bounce a marble off water.
A tenth. So that's 30 inches. And so you want that not more than 3 inches above the water. Get the thing... Oh, there we go. Right, you want to get it not much more than... not much higher than that. It's not even... If you give me something with centimetres on it, you can think again. It's inches.
It's 3/4 of an inch.
All right, okay. 3/4 added to... Oh, well, go on, farther down thing and see what happens. I think it's worse than it.
Was that worse? Was that worse?
It was almost identically the same.
Yeah. Same place?
Yep. Almost exactly.
See, what we want it to do is bounce in the middle, don't we?
Yes!
Barnes discovers that he has to get the firing angle exactly right. Any more than 7 degrees off the horizontal, and the marbles won't bounce, they just sink. Like his dad, Barnes Jr. goes through a big bag of marbles before he gets one to bounce off the water and land in the flower bed.
3, 2, 1.
Way, it works!
Where is it?
It bounced on the table, bounced on the water, bounced on the table, and ended up in the garden.
Well, I've got your picture.
Having got his marbles to bounce, the next problem for Barnes Sr. was to drop the bomb far enough away from the target to allow the aeroplane to get away safely. So he needed to know what kind of projectile would bounce the furthest. He built a bigger catapult and set it up on a lake near his office. He fired balls made out of different materials, ranging from lead to balsa wood, engraved with different surface patterns, grooves and dimples. Wallis enlisted the help of Amy Gentry, his secretary, to track the success of the experiment.
She was a national rower, oarsman with the Ladies Rowing Club, which is a cheerful lady. And when she was in the rowing boat and old Wallis stood up to do something, get his catapult right or something like that, she said, "Sit down, Wallis, I'm in charge of this boat and we don't want us both in the water."
He found that dimpled balls flew further and bounced more often than any others. Using only primitive means, Wallis had stumbled upon a ballistic phenomenon that today drives a whole industry: the quest for the perfect golf ball.
Well, this is Iron Byron. This is our mechanical golfer that we've used since 1976 to test golf balls for overall distance. Well, the beauty is that Iron Byron is very repeatable. He'll hit the same golf ball again and again, 109 mile an hour club head speed every time, unlike golfers who get tired, who maybe aren't the same today as they were yesterday.
If Iron Byron hits a regular dimpled golf ball, it will fly up to 300 yards.
Stan's going to put a smooth golf ball on the tee. The smooth ball has no dimples, but in every other respect, it's identical to a regular golf ball. 2-1 fire.
A smooth golf ball will go only half as far as a dimpled one.
The trajectory will be less stable. It'll hook and slice a lot more than the dimpled ball would have.
A smooth ball flying through the air leaves a big wake, which drags it back and slows it down. Dimples stir up the air flowing over the ball. The air sticks to the ball for longer, leaving a smaller wake. With less resistance, the ball now travels twice as far. Having worked out how to get the bomb to hit the dam, Wallis now had to ensure that it wouldn't bounce off again and end up too far away to do any damage. He wondered if he could apply the principles of backspin, a trick used by sportsmen to kill the forward momentum of a ball in motion.
Watching a golf ball spin onto a green and watching it back up must be pretty inspirational when you want to get a bomb to spin the same way that it does on a green down the surface of a dam and underwater.
Wallis added a pin to the firing mechanism of his catapult, which allowed him to make the balls spin backwards. He then moved to a hush-hush government establishment with a giant test tank, where he fired his balls at a solid target. As he had predicted, his bomb would bounce back from the dam wall. But then, backspin would push it forwards again. It would hug the wall until, 30 feet down, water pressure would cause it to explode. Meanwhile, his team was building half-size prototypes. Unsurprisingly, some looked like golf balls. But would they bounce? The team fitted a Wellington bomber with a special rig to spin them. Wallis took to the air in the bomb aimer's seat and let one go. The moment of truth. After 3 years on the drawing board, and it worked. Now Wallis was ready to drop a full-size weapon. For this, he would need the biggest gun in the Bomber Command Armoury, the Lancaster. He sent his plans to the head of Bomber Command, Sir Arthur Bomber Harris. Harris was not impressed.
This is tripe of the wildest description. There are so many ifs and ands that there's not the smallest chance of its working.
Not about to take no for an answer, Wallis got in to see Harris, confident that if he could explain the science, he would win him over. Harris had a healthy mistrust of inventors bombarding him with harebrained schemes. But Wallis had the proof that his idea was sound. The film of the trial clinched it. Wallis was promised 3 Lancaster bombers, with the proviso that the dams were to be attacked in 12 weeks' time in mid-May, when the reservoirs would be swollen with spring rain. Wallis was both excited and terrified. 12 short weeks, and nothing was ready. Wallis's trials had shown that to get the bomb to bounce towards a German dam, the aircraft had to be flown as low as 150 feet. But only the best airmen would be able to handle a Lancaster at treetop height. 147 men were handpicked and told to report to RAF Scampton in Lincolnshire. 617 Squadron was born. Among the first to arrive was Canadian pilot Ken Brown.
No one knew of a new squadron being formed there. They didn't have any aircraft. They didn't even have parachutes. They were gracious enough to say you can stay in one of the old married quarters until we find out where you belong.
It was more like a Commonwealth squadron. We had all kinds of Canadians, American, another one from New Zealand, Borneo. You know, it was quite different from any squadron I'd ever been on before.
The men chosen were among the most experienced and highly decorated flyers in the Air Force. The most experienced man of all was their commanding officer, Guy Gibson, who had logged over 170 operations since the start of the war. Gibson was an RAF legend at the age of 24, but hardly the most popular man on the new squadron.
A little man with quite a big opinion of himself. But after all, he had done an awful lot more than any of the rest of us. I would say he probably had the right to be a bit self-important.
He had a personality which was, well, I would say it was zero. He stuck to himself most of the time. Him and his dog.
In those less than politically correct times, Gibson had chosen to call his black Labrador Nigger.
I was the only one free when he needed a driver. This is how it all started. I liked him very much, but he wasn't well liked, I'm afraid. I think he was too clever for most people. Well, I sort of mothered him, I think, so I'm a lot older than him, you see. Oh, when I got on famous, I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thoroughly enjoyed driving him.
A culture of secrecy pervaded RAF Scampton. The men were told nothing about their impending mission. Initially, not even Guy Gibson was told anything. There was always the danger of careless talk. Not even the training was to be discussed.
There was a very strict security system. All letters were censored and telephones were monitored. On one occasion, a Canadian pilot officer was really rattled by Wing Commander Gibson in front of the whole squadron.
One of the Canadian fellows had a girlfriend in town, and she called up and she said, "Are you coming to the dance tonight?" He was on the carpet next morning in front of Guy Gibson. "Why were you telling some girl that you were flying last night?"
Meanwhile, Wallis was racing to scale up his bombs to 4.5 tons. But he had no time to make metal spheres big enough to carry the necessary explosive. It was quicker to make metal cylinders and then add on a wooden casing to turn them into balls. The dimpled refinement was forgotten. So far, so good. On April the 13th, 1943, Wallis watched the first trial of the full-size bomb.
Well, the net result was, of course, it didn't work. The first one was dropped from a Lancaster at 120 feet and dug straight in. Nothing happened. They reduced the height to 60 feet dropping, and when that one hit the water, it just flew apart.
The wooden casing was the Achilles heel of the bomb. Every single time it shattered on impact. Wallis was distraught. But when he reviewed the footage of the test drops, he saw how one of the cylinders broke away from the shattered casing and continued to bounce. It seemed that perhaps the troublesome wooden casing could simply be abandoned.
For the first time in life as an engineer, we didn't have to solve a problem which we had been given. We were lucky, very lucky. And you've got to have a bit of luck in engineering.
Further testing showed that if released at 60 feet, rather than 150, the naked cylinders would bounce properly. But 60 feet was a ridiculously low height to fly a Lancaster, even for 617 Squadron. Gibson explained to Wallis that at 60 feet, a pilot just had to hiccup and he would land in the drink. Nevertheless, he said he would give it a go. Unaware why they were being asked to fly so low, Gibson's men followed their leader into the sky with some trepidation.
None of them, as far as I could make out anyway, had done any low-level flying before. For the pilots, this was something new for them. In the early stages, and you can well imagine all 7 crew members were holding their breath until they got back down again. It was quite surprising. We began to enjoy it.
Joy. It was great to get the essential feeling of speed, which you never got at higher altitudes.
In the RAF, flying low was strictly forbidden, but 617 roared across the English countryside with a license to scare.
It came right over our house, and very, very low. They even knocked the tops of the trees off.
At a place called Sutton Bridge, there are electric cables going over the canal with the pylons on either side. And it was standard practice when we were on that route to fly underneath those cables and up over the bridge when you got out. It wasn't on the official exercise practice, but it was done by most crews when they were in that area. Very interesting.
Flying low was only part of it. Wallis had calculated that a bomb released at 60 feet from a Lancaster travelling at top speed would bounce and carry exactly 476 yards. So, in order to hit the target and not overshoot or sink too early, the bomb would have to be released at exactly that distance away from the dam. But how could the pilot know when he'd reached that magic distance? Simple geometry solved the problem. From reconnaissance photos, 617 knew that the towers on the Myrna Dam were 700 feet apart. The spot where they needed to drop the bomb was 476 yards away. The drop spot and the towers formed a triangle of known proportions, which 617 replicated in miniature to produce a unique aiming device.
We had a homemade handheld bomb sight, which was basically a triangle of plywood with a peg at the apex and a peg at each of the base angles.
And if we're as we're going towards the target, I would direct the aircraft. If it was too far over to the right, I'd be giving the correction left. Steady when we'd got it sorted. If we were too far to the left, the correction would be right. Steady when it was sorted. Steady. Bomb's gone.
After weeks of doing nothing but low-level flying, still not knowing what their target was going to be, the crews were getting restless. The comments from other air crews didn't make the wait any easier.
We were enjoying the war, if you want, with all this low flying that's going along, you know, and the quips that were being made. And they were a bit disgusted coming back from an operation just to learn. We were flying around the country enjoying ourselves.
They called us the armchair boys, sitting in armchairs doing damn all sort of thing.
Little did they know that the assigned date was fast approaching. It was May. The reservoirs were filling with spring rainwater, and there was the promise of a full moon in a week's time. Operation Chastise was about to begin.
All aircraft, 617
On the evening of May the 16th, 1943, the men of 617 were summoned to a briefing. Somehow they knew that this was it.
I think you can just like writing an exam, you can just go in there and feel the tension in the air. Everybody's just keyed up.
And I turned round to my colleague and said, who's the bloody civilian up there? He says, that's Barnes Wallis. Barnes Wallis, what's he do? Oh, you find out when the briefing goes on. So I sat down and the briefing started. And then we began to know what was going on.
For the first time, the detail of their mission was unveiled to the airmen. They would be over the dams in a few hours' time, but most of them had never even seen a bouncing bomb. There was a deadly silence in the room.
A little bit of shock, really. There was no real eye contact. Nobody was smiling. Nobody had any dirty jokes to tell. We were all really pondering what was going to happen.
After the briefing, the men got the first glimpse of their cargo.
Now, mine was still in a case, and on this great wooden box, etc., there was a sign there that said 11,380 pounds. And I thought that was rather a large weight to be carrying externally. It looked like a great big garbage can, really. It was hard to imagine this thing being spun at 500 RPM and what it would do to your instruments, etc. So there were a few questions in your mind before you even took off.
Guy Gibson was carrying a private burden. The day before, his beloved dog had been run over and killed. He made sure that the news was kept from his air crews. A dead Squadron mascot was a bad omen. Gibson asked that his dog be buried at midnight, the hour at which he would be flying over the German dams. Nigger was adopted as the code word to be used if the Myrna Dam were successfully breached. At 2000 hours, 133 airmen boarded the buses that took them to their planes.
Normally when you go out on a bus, there's a little bit of chatter. Someone has a story, someone's talking about his gear or something else. That didn't happen. There was a silence.
Now, people often say to me, were you frightened? My answer to that is that anybody that says he wasn't frightened is either completely emotionless or a bloody liar.
We were all frightened. There were so many misgivings. McDonald was my tail gunner, and he came over to me and he said, you know those two crews aren't coming back, don't you? And I said, yeah, I know. Come on, get aboard. It's happened before in regular bomber ops. Don't ask me what it is, it's just something that their attitude, perhaps their lack of chatting, etc., something. It was evident. They weren't coming back, neither of them did. 2 hours, they were both dead.
At 21:28 hours, the first of 19 bombers took off. Over the North Sea, they settled at 100 feet, the height they would maintain until they reached their target. The enemy gunners had a hard time spotting the low-flying Lancasters. But if a pilot climbed to get his bearings, his aircraft became a sitting duck.
Anxiety was worse. when you have a fellow on your starboard side and he explodes. It's a huge ball of fire, orange, it lit up the whole valley. I saw what I thought was a large road, trees on either side, and I just dove for it and pulled in down in behind the trees. And I went down the road about 20 feet off it. You didn't have much choice. No other place to hide.
The Myrna Dam was still 20 minutes away, but 3 planes had already been lost. Gibson's aircraft arrived at the Myrna just after midnight. For the first time, the wireless operator switched on the hydraulic motors to start the bomb spinning.
The weapon started spinning, and the whole aircraft was shaking like, boo-hoo, you never had any. The vibration was tremendous. But it was a bit frightening at the time. When I got my seat, I was, ooh. The whole aircraft was shuddering.
It was like driving your car over a rough road and not ever having your wheels balanced. So you were just literally bouncing. Everything was bouncing.
Oh, yeah, you say it was...
Yeah, your instruments were vibrating. You were vibrating.
Gibson flew into the flak. The navigator switched on 2 beams of light calibrated to intersect at precisely 60 feet. 500 yards before the target, the bomb aimer dropped the bomb. In the operations bunker, Wallis and Bomber Harris were waiting for news. At 00:28 hours, they received the first coded message from the Myrna. Gibson's bomb had exploded, but the dam was still intact. Even after 3 more bombs had dropped, the dam still held. When the next aircraft attacked, Gibson flew alongside to draw fire from the German guns. Five miles to the south, the Zorpa Dam presented a different set of problems. It was not a big stone wall, but a bank of earth, It required a different method of attack. They had to fly along the dam and drop their bomb on its crest. But a church spire blocked the approach.
We had to come in down the side of the hills, over the church steeple, then down to as low as we could get, and in chance to give ourselves time to get out again at the other side. After the first run, I said dummy run, which means it's no good, we'll have to go again. And so up we went, round again. I said that 9 times. On the 10th attack, we actually got it right. Down, over the dam at 30 feet, with the port inner engine over the crown of the dam. Bomb gone, and up and away again. I could imagine the rest saying, thank Christ for that.
When the dust settled, they realized they'd only dented the crest of the dam, but it was not over yet. 100 miles to the east, 617 attacked their final target, the Ada Dam. The first 2 planes dropped their bombs, but to no effect. They had only 1 bomb left, one last chance.
Everything's got to be perfect. And if it's not perfect, you got to go around again. Like Gibson said, if you don't do it tonight, you're going back tomorrow night and do it again.
On their second run, they got it right.
When you turned around to go over the hill, we could see the water going and see the bridges. There was a couple of bridges across the river. They just went. The water was so high, it went right over top of them, and they were gone. Everything was gone. It was a terrific sight. Everybody was really happy. Didn't have to come back tomorrow night.
Nine hours after the first plane had left the ground, the Dambusters were home again.
Well, you've never had a bowel movement as great. You just felt, we made it. And we didn't notice it really until we got out of the aircraft, that there were an awful lot of the ground crew, practically them all, were crying. And it was rather disturbing to think we were rather elated that we'd made it back, and there was a bunch of people crying. And I don't think it really hit me until Flight Sergeant Chiefy Powell came in, and the tears were just pouring down his face. We looked at him and said, "Chiefy, what's wrong?" He said, "Have you any idea where any of the other boys are?"
We had lost 8 crews, a hell of a loss for one particular raid and one particular squadron. And in fact, I'm fairly certain that Barnes Wallis actually cried because he felt that he had been the cause of killing so many young aircrew.
It was a continuation of an experiment as far as he was concerned. I don't think he really expected anybody to get hurt, let alone get killed.
Barnes Wallis was deeply affected. He vowed never again to risk a man's life on any of his future projects. Operation Chastise. Of the 19 crews that had left Scampton on the 16th of May, only 11 returned. 53 crewmen died. 4 out of 6 targets had been hit and 2 destroyed. The broken dams had wrought immense destruction. Dozens of factories destroyed or damaged, hundreds of houses in ruins, over 1,000 human casualties. The success of the operation boosted morale in Britain and throughout the Allied and occupied countries. Germany had seemed invulnerable, but Wallis and the Dambusters had delivered a blow to its very heart. The raid may not have shortened the war, but it certainly gave Hitler a bloody nose.